The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Ben Ark from LN Bits,
Hello all.
Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor,
Drop Bitcoin, not bombs.
and I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to issue one. Issue one, nuclear war. Russia seizes Ukraine nuclear power plant as its forces lay siege to cities. Last night there was an incredible event as Russia was attacking a Ukrainian nuclear power plant. At one point it looked like there was a fire at a nuclear power plant, the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. Such a fire could have caused a disaster similar to Chernobyl, spreading a cloud of nuclear waste and dust around the European continent. Fortunately or unfortunately, Russia seized control of the nuclear power facility and presumably will not light it on fire anymore. Ben Ark, what do you think about this new breakthrough in the Ukraine war where nuclear power plants are now seemingly legitimate military targets?
Yeah, I think you can, to a degree, set nuclear power plants on fire a little bit, and they're okay these days. They're a bit more resilient than Chernobyl. I think they've accounted for that. The reporting was interesting because the Russians were reporting that it was Ukrainians who lit the fire, and then the Ukrainians reporting that it's the Russians, when clearly it was the Russians because they're the ones who came in an incursion. And when you actually saw the buildings which had been attacked, it looked like more than a fire to me. And I just feel sorry for the poor, civilians who work at that power plant trying to keep the thing safe and stable and going while there's all this conflict happening around them. But it's always going to be a major military target if you can, take control of the country's power, one of their power sources early on, and that's something which they're going to try and target. Obviously, the conflict is absolutely horrendous and quite terrifying. And I think more and more people are talking about this war becoming potentially a nuclear war. And with Putin the way he is at the moment, it's a possibility that actual nuclear armaments will be used. But I do think that the nuclear power plants nowadays are more resilient than Chernobyl. So it should be fine from now, I hope. Cross fingers.
It does seem about 20 years ago, Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons voluntarily. And while at the time it was heralded as a sign of peace, and even with the START treaties going on, the US and Russia both reducing their nuclear arsenal at the same time, only to change their mind and build all new nuclear weapons. It almost seems like nuclear power needs to be coupled with nuclear weapons so that you can't be invaded, so we can't have one of these things happen. The press was absolutely breathless last night watching the audacity of this attack. Obviously, Putin wanted to control the power plant, control the power at all costs, not just cut it off at the town or later on the lines, but to have the actual nuclear facility in the same way that he took Chernobyl, because he was worried about the Ukrainians blowing it up in his backyard, causing a nuclear disaster, something that he would likely do, but his opponents wouldn't do. But it just seems like poor Ukraine has nuclear power, doesn't have nuclear weapons. They should always be paired together, the same way that your rook guards your king after you castle. Dan, Eve, what do you think about attacking nuclear power plants in Ukraine?
Well, from an objective point of view, it's kind of a logical thing, right? That nuclear power plant specifically, I think it's the biggest in the world, right? It's like it is 25% of Ukraine's power, which is a huge amount. If you get control of that, and things get nasty, and you can start shutting down the power and kind of kill the will of the people, right? You take out their power, then you take out the other facilities like water, And from a war perspective, it's a kind of it's a nasty but kind of a thing to do if you want to try and beat your opponent on the mental level, not just the physical level, right? Take away their power, take away their water. But I think I almost think it's a good thing that Ukraine doesn't have nuclear weapons, because they could have been brought out by now, right? So there's still, the way I see it is, there's still a chance to de-escalate this tension before the nukes come out. There are, I was looking a minute ago, and there's already reports of kind of rockets on the way to Kiev, and not just this huge, apparently 60-kilometer long convoy, but actual, there are rockets in action at the moment on the outskirts of Kiev. So that's not sounding good. And I think there was, I can't remember who it was, but someone who's senior in the sort of the Russian Empire was saying that, but essentially with regards to nukes, if there's no Russia, there's, if there's no Soviets, there's no world. And that's a very worrying thing. It's like even if we lose, we'll lose by taking out everything, and that's obviously it's a bad attitude to have. There's more than just Russia and NATO as well. Obviously, there's loads of other countries in the world that would be affected. So it's just scary, right, to know that people have so much power. I think the quote was something like, there was 500 nuclear warheads on submarines alone, which is more than enough to take out the world. And that's, again, more scary thoughts of repeats of the Cold War era, where there were, these real close encounters that the codes almost got, run through, and like we almost hit nuclear disaster, but it was for, we're lucky that someone didn't have something with them at the time or whatever, and it was de-escalated before then, and it was actually an issue. There was no issue, there was a miscommunication or something. And that's, I think, the scariest part, right, is that there are a lot of sensible people in, but if something happens, that a miscommunication happens, it becomes a domino effect, right? One nuke goes off, then the other side thinks, right, shit, we've got to fire our nukes, and then the other side's like, right, there's already nukes in, we don't know where they're going yet, so we're just going to fire ours to wherever, and it becomes this mass kind of domino orgy of nukes, and it's a real scary thing. But there are some funny things coming out of this whole conflict. You got to see the funny side. And so, so Ukraine tweeted the other day. I watched it, and it was Tom, you actually brought it up before the show. But we were just chatting about the Ukrainian lady that approached the soldiers, and I'll let you tell the actual main part. But I've got a screenshot of the official Ukraine Twitter account, and some lady with a video with the caption "stupid C word." And this is the official Twitter account, so it's almost a no holds barred affair, right? They're on the social media. It's a war of misinformation and information, and there's just a lot of craziness going on right now, and it would just be really nice if everyone just calmed down. We put the nukes down, had a conversation, maybe pulled some tanks back. But if you are in Ukraine, if you haven't already heard this, a good bit of news is that if you confiscate Russian tanks, you don't need to declare them on your tax returns, apparently. So there's good coming out of it.
They also say that Ukraine is launching its own DAO, maybe selling some tokens, maybe some NFTs, and of course they're accepting Bitcoin and Ethereum. So there are lots of funny things going on. But I agree with Dan. It's that threat of nuclear war, especially the nuclear weapons on the submarines, which could hit anywhere in the world, anywhere in America. That is probably the reason why America, NATO, the world, whichever one you want to pick, is not invading Ukraine and standing up to Russia. Now, Gary Kasparov, chess grandmaster, politician now, made some incredible points on his Twitter this morning that if you don't stand up to Putin now, it's going to get worse later. The kind of lessons that he's gotten in Ukraine, even though there has been fierce resistance from the people, and I think that'll continue, it hasn't convinced him not to do this. So if he's going to roll into Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all these kind of countries, everywhere that used to be Russia, Prague, not Czechoslovakia, but Slovakia, Slovenia, all the countries down there, he's going to roll into all of them because nothing stopped him here. And I was talking to my roommate yesterday. We were watching this, just the economic disaster of this. All these buildings that used to be buildings, people that used to have jobs, everything destroyed. This husk of a country, even the nuclear power plant. Like, look at all the power they were using. They must have been doing something. Now they're doing nothing. Putin is not gaining any economic advantage here. It seems this is all about reuniting the Soviet Union, because that's the way he remembers it. Ben's shaking his head, but
No, it's not at all. It's not at all.
there was an article that was written before all of this that was leaked because it was on a schedule. And in the article, they exposed the truth of this, that they just want to get the gang back together. And look at Belarus and Russia working as a team to attack Ukraine. This is good old days. This is the way it ought to be in Putin's mind.
No, I'll have to disagree with you on that one. The whole Ukraine conflict is based on Ukraine joining NATO, and then the US, Russia, almost made me slip up then, say the USSR, Russia perceiving a threat of US encroachment towards their border. It's not about reuniting like the USSR and all these countries which broke away during that time. It's about the neutrality of the Ukraine. Yanis Varoufakis kind of put it well, which he said that the only way this is going to de-escalate effectively and quickly is if the US and Russia both back down. So Russia go out of Ukraine and Ukraine swear a pact of neutrality, and it will remain neutral, which is not going to happen because obviously they're a sovereign nation and they want to join NATO, and that's fine. But in the perfect world, politically, that would be the thing which would need to happen to stop this conflict from escalating, which is quite terrifying because this conflict will escalate. And nuclear war is it. So in the UK, we have our submarines, our nuclear submarines. One of those submarines has more firepower in it than all the firepower which was released in the entire of the Second and First World War combined. So the amount of when we talk about nuclear warheads now, compared to the sorts of nuclear armaments which we've seen deployed in somewhere like the Second World War, they're so much bigger than they were, and they could cause so much more damage. And it's an absolutely terrifying concept for humanity for us to go down that road. But Putin is the man who could make this thing happen. But I mean, going back to the taking out the energy grid, this is a good argument for working against central points of failure and why we need to kind of devolve all power from government. So we take energy production, make it more local. This is the sort of anarchist argument. There's only so much they can do if you take their power away from it. So if you could literally, have your own solar panel array, build your own energy systems, and then if the Ukraine had that, if the Ukraine were all completely off grid and self-sufficient, then there wouldn't be a nuclear power plant to go in and attack. So that's hopefully where eventually we'll end up if we manage to not blow ourselves up as humanity doesn't manage to blow itself up by this type of conflict and all these nukes which everybody has.
He's definitely shown that he's not happy with NATO being right next to Russia. I think they're obviously there. I think there is a part of him. He's an ex-KGB, so he's probably got kind of the old USSR vibes in him.
He's an incredibly scary dude. He's a proper sort of state ex-KGB guy. I mean, look at the apartment bombings in Russia, which was their excuse to go and invade Chechnya. I mean, there's a good body of evidence. This is why Litvinenko was killed. There's a good body of evidence that they actually deployed those bombs in those civilian apartment blocks and killed their own people as an excuse so they could go in and cause the Chechnyan war. And that would have been directly at Putin's decision would have been one of. So yeah, no, he's a very scary bloke, and no one should take him too lightly. I would urge everyone to watch Putin's address to Russia at the beginning of the conflict, his half-hour address to Russia. When you watch that, you think, from his point of view, what he's saying makes sense. He talks about the US and not needing much of an excuse to go into places like Iraq, and then compares that to the feeling of,
are those things equal? Is the US entry into Iraq equal to the Russian entry into Ukraine?
Well, he's basically gone.
I don't think they're equal. I disagree with his analogy.
He's gone and done the same thing, but his excuse is to stop the US from doing that to Russia. So
I disagree. I think
It's the
that
same.
again, it's the paranoid, it's the insane. It's
Same.
if you'd stolen $600 billion from a country and you were feeling bad about it, that's the kind of guilt I think you'd project. And again, he's hollowing out Ukraine. Ukraine was an economic power. People had jobs and work. There's no jobs, there's no work. They're as good as peasants in the fields. Now, if you like that kind of thing and you like a country full of peasants in the field and you're maybe looking backwards and romantically imagining when it used to be that way, it's that way again. Like they've ruined this country.
I think
And
you're doing a
women
huge
and children.
yeah, to just dismiss the dude as a complete lunatic and wanting to bring back the USSR. I think you're doing a discredit to
Well,
the
again,
to the top.
that's what the article said. The
It's far
article,
more
which was not
complicated.
supposed to be leaked, that they took up and put up and took down, was
I-
very clear about the stupid West and the powerful East.
But I think there's an element of that. But he's very adamant that it's about protecting his own backyard and putting NATO, getting Ukraine, who were kind of they're not in the EU, they weren't in NATO, they've now signed for both, or they're trying to get into the EU quick. So I think there's logic to it, right? But what's interesting is that isn't the US still buying oil and enriched uranium from Russia? So they provided all these sanctions, they're confiscating stuff all around the world, yet they're still buying oil and enriched uranium from Russia. So there's a lot going on under the table that
There was a few MPs in the UK Parliament, and when Boris was saying, they completely condemned Putin and Russia and the actions against the Ukrainians, and then there's a few MPs were like, "Can we still get the gas from them? Is that okay?" And he's like, "No, we can't."
Well,
we can. Shh, be quiet.
The owners of the
And
Nord
part of
Stream
that is an attempt to intertwine with them economically, like the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The idea with both China and Russia that if we get enough economic links,
And the US.
we won't be able to go to war.
And
And
the
that's
US.
always been the goal.
And the
And
US. And the US.
sure, well, same thing. I mean, we all build the other things, and even now, immediately when the war started, Finland and other countries started cutting off Russia's supply of rocket materials. So now they can't make any more rockets because they don't have any more materials. So it happens really fast, and unfortunately, I think his pure brutality will carry him through, and his ability and willingness to slaughter hundreds of thousands of people will win him the territory. But again, it's a hollowed out territory with no business, no economy. He's got a nuclear plant now, which is nice, but tons of dead people. Now they have Molotov cocktails. Now they're fighting underground. I don't think it's an easy conquest. I don't think it's a successful conquest unless it's conquest for conquest's sake, which is what it seems to be. As the article said, this was a generational question that Mr. Putin chose not to leave to a further generation. His idea being that if he left power, this Ukraine question would not get solved. Therefore, he must solve it now. The dreams of a 70-year-old man trying to close up accounts on his borders. And he's right. Like, if he hadn't have messed with this, it probably would have been peacefully solved. There wouldn't be this destruction of the economy of Ukraine, the destruction of the economy in Russia with the sanctions, kicking them out of SWIFT, just series of totally unnecessary destruction caused all over the place. And again, the thing with last night, somehow, I mean, that nuclear destruction thing, we're not willing to go to war for hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of dead civilians, but we are kind of willing to go to war if you're going to blow up a nuclear power plant on purpose to cause an environmental catastrophe. See the interesting kind of fine line that the nuclear question gives, like that they were, I mean, we were pretty much like, is there a way that we could go in there and surround the power plant, just because that could cause a problem? Meanwhile, like a million civilians over there, like we can't surround them because that could cause another problem. It's a very disappointing state of affairs for the
I
world.
think everyone's trying to contain the conflict because as soon as Russia has conflict, any sort of conflict with NATO countries, then it will all kick off and you end up with a world war. I mean, no one wants that, including Russia. They don't want a world war. I urge you, if you haven't listened to it, listen to Putin's half-hour address to Russia. because then you'll see his point of view, and you'll see that this isn't some lunatic trying to just bring back the USSR. This is someone who is the master chess player. He's the reason. There's a reason within 20 years he went from like a unemployed KGB officer to one of the most powerful people on the planet.
He's not
so
just
yeah, so yeah. But the funny thing is, it's hard to find, and you're like, this is the speech which started the war and potentially the Third World War. But it's actually quite hard to get your hands on. But have a look for it. You'll find it, Putin's address to Russia, and you'll see from his point of view what he's saying about how if Ukraine were to join NATO, then I mean the worry is, I suppose, that if you have a big imperialist,
it's called a slippery slope fallacy.
The worry is
the man has a paranoid slippery slope fallacy, and you're like, I buy it.
No, I'm not buying it. I'm just saying. So I'm just saying, like, this is, you need to look at both perspectives in order to, anyway. So objectively, and not just, characterize somebody. So the worry is that if Ukraine become part of NATO, and then if US loses its control and loses its superpower, which it has, and then it has some bad economic problems, then it may make sense for it to then start to try and encroach in on Russia or cause some conflict itself. That's his point. That's what he thinks. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's what he actually thinks. And watch the video, watch the address, and then.
I remember when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and he said the same kind of thing. Kuwait was encroaching on his territory, and there would be problems in the future with Kuwait. So Saddam Hussein settled the Kuwait question. We just don't allow this in Europe. Not since the Second World War do we allow larger countries to invade smaller countries for arbitrary reasons.
Is that just for the US to do?
He felt bad, man. He had like some sand in his bed, and he was like, there's sand in my bed. I must invade Ukraine. So when the same thing happens in Latvia and Lithuania, it already happened in Crimea, it happened in Georgia. So we're up to the third one. So we're pretty much
we did it in Iraq. We did it very recently. We went into Iraq with no real reason to
watching too much Putin television.
No, we invaded Iraq.
Cancel your subscription to Russia Today.
What's interesting?
Subscription.
You also invaded England and the UK and the US. We invaded Iraq on unfounded grounds. We just wanted their oil.
Both the Soviets and the United States invaded Afghanistan. I like wars from the past are fascinating, but here
it wasn't a war from the past.
He invaded Ukraine for no reason. He went into those two republics. He said they were breakaway republics. Then suddenly, 2 days later, he was attacking the country from all sides.
It's one of the longest running modern wars.
There's no reason. The reason was he wants it back because it looks good on the blob. Remember what the blob used to look like? The big pink blob that had, spread out from everywhere, has Siberia and everything. It looks better when it's bigger.
I think we need Germany to build up a massive army and go marching through Poland to take on the USSR.
Well, there was actually a legitimate news source where they said that Putin had waited until Merkel left power to do this, meaning that Putin probably thought Merkel might check him on this. While the German response has been very strong, sending weapons for the first time in their history, it hasn't been sending troops strong. Maybe Putin thought Merkel would send troops.
She's a badass. God bless her.
Yeah, das ist richtig.
Well, and that's what Kasparov was arguing for. You guys got to check out the Kasparov tweet. It's on the Mad Bitcoins Twitter account. There's a whole string of them. And basically, Kasparov goes through the classic dictatorship argument where we didn't stop him in Crimea. We didn't stop him in Georgia. We're not going to stop him in Ukraine. So are we really going to stop him when he rolls into Estonia? That's not really big. Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, it's Prague, Czechoslovakia, all these places. Like, he wants them back.
I like the latest tweet or article from Babylon B, taking the piss out of all the other sort of the company sanctions, and they're saying that Russia has now been removed from Apple Maps and it's just been replaced with the East Atlantic Ocean. But it is interesting. All these, IKEA. There's lots of companies that are now kind of taking their services out of Russia. So it's going to be hitting them pretty hard, like the average person. But what's sad is that if you're a Russian living outside of Russia, and even those living in that are powerless, like there's a lot of people that are reports of people taking businesses that are being beaten in and stuff like that, which is a pretty shitty thing to do. Obviously what's bad that's happening is bad, what's happening in Ukraine, but yeah,
there's some companies have some huge factories in Ukraine, and Ukraine are actually the world's biggest exporter of sunflower, which is a very important ingredient for a lot of production lines. So I think the whole world's economy is going to suffer from this conflict, and as well as the sanctions on Russia itself is also going to impact us, because obviously Russia are huge exporters of energy, for example. I think 30% or something of Europe's energies originates from Russia or something crazy. So yeah, we're all going to be impacted by this.
There's also a major crisis in wheat. Ukraine produces most of the wheat for the Middle East, and there's definitely going to be bread shortages and so on. But we could just let the people eat cake, right? Moving on to issue 2. Shake Shack is offering Bitcoin rewards for customers using Block's Cash App. Yes, you can get 15% back on your burgers, hot dogs, shakes, and fries, and more at Shake Shack. Isn't that nice? Dan, Eve, what about Shake Shack offering this incredible offer? There's also a word. We'll just talk about Shake Shack first, then we'll talk about Lugano. Go ahead, Dan. What about?
I think it's awesome. There's always been this fantasy. I remember, like, of I think Starbucks was picked as one of the big sort of chains where it would, Bitcoin could be pitched as a reward for, a cashback reward, and it's a great way of getting people into Bitcoin, right? Especially when they're like, the thing that that got people into Bitcoin, when I've shilled it, is you give them some Satoshis, and then you watch the price go up and down and get excited, and they jump. It's like pushing them onto the roller coaster, and or helping them onto the roller coaster. They're consented to going on the roller coaster by downloading an app or whatever. But this is a great way of doing it. So it's like a risk-free way. You go to Shake Shack, you buy whatever it is, you have their app, you get Satoshis, and you take a seat on the Bitcoin roller coaster, and then you start to learn about it. Then you start to know about the hard money and all the other the unconfiscatableness of Bitcoin. Obviously, if you're owning your own private keys. So I think it's a great thing. And again, any nationwide rollout of something that's not accepting Bitcoin, but giving people Bitcoin is a great idea. The article didn't say anything about them accepting Bitcoin, though, right? It didn't say that you can pay.
It did say that this is going to be kind of like a test to see if you want to accept Bitcoin. So if a lot of young people, that target dynamic, go there and get a lot of Bitcoin rewards, I'm sure the company will be waiting there on the other side to take those Bitcoin rewards back for some delicious burgers and hot dogs.
Very sensible. Yeah. No, definitely. It's like, they're testing the water as a big company. They don't have to put themselves out at risk too much by accepting Bitcoin right now. A lot of these companies, they don't want to be seen by their shareholders to be putting, Bitcoin's still known as this nefarious thing, right? It's still known as this. It still gets called by, what's his name? Charlie Munger, Minga Munger, and all the other crew, the old school crew still call it like, rat feces and all that. So it's difficult for a company to dive in whilst, relatively respected people of the old system are still dissing it. So I think, yeah, great. Go for it, Shake Shack. Epic little move, I think. And we might see some others doing it as well.
Ben Ark, do you want some rat feces on your burger?
I couldn't work out whether it's just like some sort of how much involvement Shake Shack actually had, and it's not just Cash App, and part of, like, with their Block Cash card, that you get this 15% Bitcoin back every time you make a purchase in some companies such as Shake Shack, and then somehow this has just kind of been, some press has been piggybacked.
I agree. I was impressed with Coinbase's reporting here. They put the word report on the article, then they took the word report off. I'm very surprised they didn't use the word breaking in the headline for this kind of averlingus, this kind of infotainment. It was a beautiful distraction, wasn't it? It was wonderfully paid promotion. Huh?
Is that what it was then? Do you think it's just a case of, like, people reporting on other people's reports and there's not actually much substance underneath it? Like, if you actually said to the Shake Shack CEO, "Oh, you're now, giving Bitcoin back as a sats back for people making payments, would they be like, what are we? Are we just sort of partnered with those guys and that's something they do?
Yeah, I don't even think there'll be a sign at the store. I think this is an internal Cash App promotion that's been written up into an article on
Oh,
CoinDesk. But I
Go
think
for it, Dan.
it's a
you
great
sausage man.
distraction from nuclear war, right? Like Shake Shack, nuclear war.
Yeah.
You were picturing the burgers and the hot dogs and the hamburgers,
Bitcoin
frosty
Utopia.
chocolate shake. You know, it's delicious.
That's cool. No, I mean, Satsback is a very good way of people first engaging with Bitcoin. The block cash card giving sats back is cool. They're not real sats, I suppose, because it's just little database flips in their database. So take them out if you can. I don't know if you know if you can from the Cash App. Isn't that hard to take the sats out? I think it is. I need to play around with this software more.
They probably go into your account, but pop quiz. If you got a Coinbase card and Coinbase offered you 1% back in Bitcoin or 4% back in Stellar, which would you take, Dan Eve?
I'd say okay, it depends on the conditions, right? Because I'd take the 4% back in Stellar and then I'd sell it for Bitcoin. Boom. Bish bash bosh.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I did, Ben. How about you?
I would do that too. It's a good idea. Yeah, sell it for Bitcoin.
I figured there's no way the Stellar can go down enough in the time from where I don't have it to when I have it that I couldn't flip it for more than 1 to 2% of Bitcoin. But that's a true story. If you get the Coinbase card, that will happen to you, and you'll be like, but I'm a Bitcoiner, and then you'll be like, damn it, I'm earning returns in Stellar.
Did you did that? You did that thing and then you lost money because you didn't sell it in time or something?
I haven't done it at all yet, but I did get the card, and then part of the card was like, oh, you get your Bitcoin rewards, and then they were like 4 times the rewards. yeah. I'm a big fan of Stellar, I guess. Closet Stellar user. Moving on to issue 3. Lugano, Switzerland will make Bitcoin legal tender. Following the footsteps of El Salvador, literally quoting them and directly following in their footsteps in an attempt to increase their GDP and tourism, as the GDP and tourism of El Salvador increased, the city of Lugano, Switzerland, famous for the Olympics, is now accepting Bitcoin. They're going to have a convention and they're going to try to launch some bonds. They might not have a volcano, but you get the idea. Ben Ark, Lugano, Switzerland, the new home for Bitcoin, or following in El Salvador's footsteps almost exactly as if the Music Man had been there?
No, I mean, I've been to Lugano and it's a beautiful little town, lakeside town. Got a lot of money there. A lot of Italian money ends up in Lugano. Lots of little banks, so they've got some sort of interesting localized financial stuff going on. So it's a good thing that they're all having contact with Bitcoin because they are going to try and make the whole town Bitcoin friendly. From what I hear, there was I reached out to a local, but I won't say who that is because I don't want to dox them. But a Bitcoiner everyone knows and loves, and then tried to get the inside scoop. And I think the original. I'm just saying that just because I'm not sure whether everyone knows where they live, so I don't want to say where they live because they live near that region.
No doubt a possible Swiss banking tie-in.
They were going to allow what was it, taxes to be paid in Bitcoin, and then also for real estate to be paid for in Bitcoin. But I think all the great ambitions for what they were going to be able to do with Bitcoin. In fact, I could quickly let me.
It clearly lists bar as the number one thing. I'm looking.
Yeah, but I like that it's just bar. I mean, there are a lot of bars in Lugano. It's part of the old Haute-Savoy region, which is historically a very rich region of the world in the Alps. It's very pretty. So originally, the city would have accepted Bitcoin directly for any entry, taxes, fines, etc. They've got a Lugano shitcoin, and they were gonna get rid of that with this new thing. They were going to announce a 10% of city treasury in Bitcoin. So they would hold 10% of the city's treasury in Bitcoin. And then they were going to create bilateral deals to onboard 99% of local merchants. So they were going to get almost everybody onto Bitcoin. However, that all got clawed back. So they're not killing the shitcoins. There is still a Lugano shitcoin going on, which is a shame. they didn't mention in this event anything about the 10% of the city holding their treasury, them holding 10% of their treasury in Bitcoin. And I imagine Lugano has a big treasury because it's a very fancy little town. I think they've made deals onboarding 200 local merchants. So not the 99%, more probably like a few percent, but it's not a bad, it's still a positive, net positive, I would say, and a good place to start from. They are in the article as well. It did say that they're building relationships with local academia, which is great. I want to see more of that. Part of the reason we built Bits in Python was to try and make it more accessible for students when they want to experiment and build on top of Bitcoin Lightning stuff. So no, I'm generally quite excited about it. I think we should go there. They're having another conference in October, where I think they're going to sort of readdress how it's all worked out. So yeah, I'm surprised there wasn't more coverage of this in sort of Bitcoin Twitter. I'm not sure why it kind of got overlooked, but I think it's a pretty big deal that this very wealthy little town in Switzerland, which has a lot of this Italian money in it and has all these little local banks, safe haven type banks, and is now becoming very Bitcoin friendly, because it's quite an influential little town, and I look forward to traveling to it and spending some sats in a bar.
Well, it certainly sounds like a nicer place to visit than El Salvador. We could also check out this Simpsons clip. I went ahead and pulled up the actual clip this time. Here we go. Down with money's like a mule with a spinning wheel. Don't know how he got it, and danged if he knows how to use it. Yes, it's an exciting event, I suppose, but it does just seem like they're following on. There was already great Italian city of Bitcoin from years ago, and they tried
there was Zug as well. Zug in Switzerland's the shitcoin value of shitcoins, isn't it? That's where Ethereum set up.
I like how we can support them and applaud them, and it's like it's great they're doing Bitcoin, but they're also doing a shitcoin. And then it's like next week they're doing an Ethereum.
They already had
2 weeks from now they're doing NFTs, and it just seems like a town that's read the tech newspaper is following the new tech trends. We got the new XR7s in, boss. We're gonna mine for some Ethereum next week. They're just.
I think we're in a different. So when Zog set up, we're in a very different landscape culturally and technologically. And the very fact that they call it Plan B means that it's going to be kind of hard to escape from that and go shitcoin here. And the Lugano coin, I think, was already there. So the idea was to try and kill it with the Bitcoin, but they're not killing it. So I don't think it's going to be another shitcoin valley. I hope.
What they really need to do is make the shitcoin backed by Bitcoin, and then have some kind of an accounting thing like Hex, where you have to lock up your shitcoin for 10 years, and then if it's Tuesday, you get to cash some out, but only every other Tuesday, and you have to stand on one foot. There are a lot of rules. Dan Eve, a town in Switzerland is taking Bitcoin. You can even pay your taxes and your speeding tickets and so forth with Bitcoin. Your dreams are coming true.
I think it's a cool idea, right? I think Zug has been accepting Bitcoin since 2020 for taxes, but obviously not accepting it as legal tender. But obviously there's the LVGA, city shitcoin or shitty shitcoin, as South Park dude would say. But also they're also making USDT a legal tender. So it's like making a shitcoin of a shitcoin a legal tender. Which is a bit odd, but obviously, they've probably got some payoffs from Tether to kind of help set up the infrastructure. So, why not? If it helps promote Bitcoin, that's the main thing. It's a small town, like 64,000 inhabitants. So it's a kind of a nice little test bed as well. And they said they're going to get into the mining So I wonder. I wonder how they're going to do that. Whether it's going to be like, I don't know, whether maybe solar panels, right? It's on the mountains. There's always mountains in Switzerland, so maybe they put a load of solar panels up and they can do some Bitcoin mining. And because of it's all cool out there as well, or up there, at high altitude, then they don't need to worry about energy going into cooling down the miners. So that's kind of quite positive. But yeah, I think nice. It's always good when a country accepts Bitcoin in some way, or a city or whatever. So yeah, I think it's a nice little step up from accepting Swiss francs, which I respect, obviously, but not as much as Bitcoin for obvious reasons.
I like the way it's always Bitcoin and It's like they're accepting Bitcoin, and they think
Shitcoin.
Dogecoin's pretty cool. Like they're accepting Bitcoin, and they're running their own DAO on Ethereum and printing NFTs. It's always both.
But what if though? What if
We have
they
no true friends. We have failed temporary friends who blow in the wind and care not which direction they go.
El Salvador didn't
every house was NFT'd?
have an and except
They're printing Bitcoin bonds. They're making a complex financial instrument to enrich themselves. Yes. They're building a whole city off the back of the Bitcoin. They can't even fix up their own cities, like you said. Ha! Ha! Would you like more clips like this where we say, ha? Check out WCN Clips. We've almost got 100 subscribers. Everyone should just stop what they're doing right now. Google with the Google machine, WCN spacebar. That's the big one. Clips. And then if 9 more people could survive. Now, I know there's only 50 people watching, so give us a thumbs up. Prove me there's more than 50, because it says 500 watching, but every week it says 50 thumbs up. So if there are 50 people watching now and they all went and subscribed to WCN Clips, we could break 100. So, just saying. That's what advertising is. I'm waiting. I'm giving you a chance to like go click it, come back. Okay, they say they all paused it. Moving on to issue 4. China says domestic Bitcoin trading is plummeting after the crackdown. Crackdown's my favorite headline word. Breakdown, crackdown, all those things. Yes, trades in the People's Republic of China has diminished from 90% of Bitcoin transactions to 10% of Bitcoin transactions after the country successfully kicked the Bitcoin miners and their energy using mining machines out of the country. We're still in the short term where China celebrates their victory over a decentralized currency, which could have brought them competition with the US dollar and perhaps parity in the world. Ben Ark, what do you think about China's short-term victory over Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, China don't need to do anything to compete with the US at this point in time with their production capacity. But I mean, it makes sense. The reason they've been so successful, and it's a terrifying thought. Actually, there was someone on the commentary of the Russia thing, and they were saying, don't think of Russia as a failed democracy. Think of Russia as a succeeding authoritarian state. And it's similar with China. Like, don't think of it as the scary reality is that concoction of a free market with central control for some aspects may be the most efficient ways to do things. And if it is, then why wouldn't all these other countries gravitate in that same direction? And why don't we just eventually start losing democracy? Which always annoys me when these Bitcoiners say attack democracy, because democracy is such a hard thing to defend. You don't then need more people attacking, but whatever. So it's quite a terrifying thought, and they don't want Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the free and open source money. It gives people another option. They want control. Most countries want this, in fact. But in somewhere like the US, where people are freer, then it's harder for the US to turn around and say, right, we're just going to ban Bitcoin. They could do it, they have the power to do such things, but I mean, they're not going to, because people would say, wait, this is something we should be free to use, and they would kind of, they would as citizens, they would make a stand. Whereas we're in a country where people have kind of been treated more like subjects for a longer period of time, they're less likely to revolt against the authoritarian state in which they're living in. And in China, China want complete control over the currency, so they don't want something like Bitcoin to exist. And the best way to not have it exist is just to say you're not allowed to use it, and have the crackdowns on mining. But I mean, the Chinese still find a way of contributing to the Bitcoin ecosystem. One example is, these little points of sale, which people have been making at the conferences, which I've been going to. I made like a point of sale. It did quite well on Twitter. And then the Chinese manufacturer who manufactured the microcontrollers, I contacted them and said, can you build like a little hat so we can just easily plug in this keypad to the microcontroller? And they said, yeah, sure. And because, they could see that clearly there's a market for these things, and people are buying them. Bitcoiners are buying them, so they're manufacturing these points of sale, which we're going to use in the Bitcoin world, and actually comes pre-flashed with my old Bitcoin point of sale software on. So there's some people in China which are experimenting with Bitcoin software and Bitcoin hardware, and so the economy will, and the people who are interested in Bitcoin will find a way of contributing to the Bitcoin space, but the Chinese authoritarian government make it harder every day, and they have more and more crackdowns. But it's a losing battle. Obviously, we all know that. But this idea of perhaps one of those authoritarian states being more successful in the long term than a democratically run state, I find that quite scary personally.
That is the big fear, that all of the democracies end as authoritarian dictatorship states, because it is so fragile, this democratic period, and keeping it together, especially with an uninformed populace, intentionally perhaps, that yes, we might lose all of them. I also agree with you, Ben, as you're talking about the United States. It doesn't ban Bitcoin, but it does kind of a soft ban on Bitcoin. It's so strange for me to watch CNBC every morning. They're talking about Bitcoin, or crypto, as they like to call it here on the World Crypto Network. We thought of that in 2014. And it's always this soft ban where it's like, Bitcoin's only used by dirty criminals on the Silk Road. And so that turned off a lot of people. A lot of people who could have gotten into Bitcoin were like, well, I'm not a dirty criminal. I'm not even going to look at that thing. And years later, they look at it and they're like, it's kind of a lot more like math and computer programs, and a lot less like dirty criminals only. And the same thing now, where Bitcoin is for terrorists or people that want to evade sanctions, people that want to destroy the world order and cause chaos and so forth, which is a great way to get a lot of people to not get into Bitcoin, or to say things like Ethereum's better than Bitcoin because it doesn't destroy the world, et cetera, et cetera. It's a soft ban. It's a quiet. You're not supposed to be involved, not, the harsh 100.
That's very true, actually. There's a lot of bad press at the moment on Bitcoin with the sanction thing, isn't there? With it helps the Russians get their money around the sanctions, the US sanctions against the war thing. So pro Bitcoin, pro war, it seems.
It's always the same as that great movie that Ricky Gervais put out, The Invention of Lying, where he's talking about God, and he's like, God does all the good things, but God also does all the bad things. And they're like, God, gave my cousin cancer. And they're like, yes, but God also cured your cousin's cancer. And they're like, oh, and it's like, Bitcoin can collect donations for the Ukrainians. Yes, but it can also help the Russians evade sanctions. It's like, oh, it's all, it's this neutral thing. And that's very hard to understand. Dan, Eve, your thoughts about China cracking down on Bitcoin?
Well, when Bitcoin's always been volatile to random bits of news, but back in sort of 2013, when I started learning about Bitcoin, it was all about China. It was all about China banning and unbanning, and will they ban it? And it kind of, the impact has been lost in, I don't know, about 2018 or something. It's become less of a real issue. It didn't really impact on the hash rate. The fact that bit info charts, right? It was breaking records right last week. I haven't actually checked up on it. I usually do have a little look. So what we're looking at now, the difficulty is 27.55 trillion, which is crazy, and 198 exahashes, which is flirting around like the kind of all-time highs. I think the all-time high was at something more like about 229. But it's certainly bigger than anything else pre-2022. And so really the banning of mining hasn't had that much of an impact. And we all know why they started cracking down a bit more, which was because the PBOC is introducing their CBDC, throwing some acronyms in there, quoting South Park, welcome to Shittycoin. But I even had some of the dudes that I used to shill Bitcoin to, in the treasury team of one of the finance companies I worked at, texting me actually last year, or more the year before, the end of 2020, and actually saying, "Hey, I've heard that China are bringing out their own cryptocurrency. Do you know how to get hold of any?" So word's obviously spreading that China are bringing out their shitcoin, and I don't know, but people seem to think it's gonna moon like Bitcoin did. But maybe that's what China wants people to think, right? That's why they're cutting down, all the PBOC anyway, are trying to make people think that, and the CCP, that you buy into their cryptocurrency and it's going to do better than Bitcoin. But the actual banning of mining did a good thing, right? It didn't harm Bitcoin mining in the long term. And if a lot of the articles before the Bitcoin mining ban was saying, well, 50% of more than 50% of mining power comes from China alone, and now that's helped the Bitcoin mining distribution. It's now like spread out a lot farther and wider than being concentrated, quite heavily in not say just China, but in a lot of a lot of the hash power was coming from China. So banning it actually did a good thing for the whole Bitcoin mining infrastructure. So some things, it's like, is it the not quite the same analogy, but the Streisand effect, like by doing something, like you end up making your own situation worse. So I think by China banning mining, they made the situation better for Bitcoin mining being more decentralized, which is ultimately worse for China because they now don't have any Bitcoin and they're not even mining it. So hurrah for the PBOC. Great move.
It did improve Bitcoin's decentralization, but it might have made Bitcoin less environmentally friendly, as a lot of times in China, it was able to use that legendary extra leftover energy from hydropower and other facilities that run out of battery source. So we win some and we lose some.
But there was also, but a lot of the thing, China still does have a lot of coal power plants, right? So even though like the Bitcoiners knew that renewables were being used, the no coiners were still reading all these mainstream articles that were just going, oh well, China opens like 5 new coal plants every second, therefore Bitcoin mining uses that. So at least it did good in that respect, that argument can no longer be used because it was out of China where these 7 trillion coal plants were being introduced every 5 minutes.
It'd be interesting to see what these central bank coins are actually like, because I imagine the Chinese one will be pegged to people's, I don't know, citizenship IDs or something. So I'm not even sure it'll be able to be traded out in the wide world, unless people start buying Chinese identities. No, but even then, I imagine that the price volatility will be managed centrally in some way, using some mechanism. But all central banks are exploring, what do you call them? I call them digitally native currencies. What do you call them?
CBDC, central bank digital currency.
What's it called?
CBDC.
It's like that place that the talking heads used to play.
CBDC.
DBDC.
Like ACDC, but with CBDC instead.
DBD. Okay, well the DBDBCs, they're all looking into them. European Bank of England, the Fed. But it's down. Obviously, they'll have all different ways of doing them. And then ultimately, they're not going to compete with Bitcoin, because how would they possibly? They just haven't got the But anyway, it was just interesting to see how China do it, because, like you say, if it floats out in the wider world, then people could speculate on the currency compared to other currencies, which I don't think China would want either. They want control.
I want to go out on a limb and predict that China's currency will be just like Facebook's currency, but I think it'll actually come out. They've put too much work into it to not put it out, and they don't have the option like Facebook to just call it a dead project and sell it on the back market for $300 million or whatever it was. They don't have there's not a way for China to get out of this thing other than releasing it. Moving on to the exit question: force prediction against the Bitcoin predictor ball, the source of all knowledge and truth, which all traders of Bitcoin. There's this new thing at Bitcoin Magazine, the HODL index or something, you can follow that. You can follow Plan B. You can follow the rainbow chart, or you can follow the Bitcoin predictor ball, which has never, ever been wrong, ever. Ben Ark, the price of Bitcoin this time next week, higher or lower, keeping in mind that you are competing against the prognosticator of prognosticators, the predictor of predictors, the Bitcoin ball.
I know we're in our little Bitcoin bubble, our little Bitcoin world, so everything kind of seems Bitcoin related. But I do think that impressions, just Bitcoin's getting a lot of impressions, like you say, on both sides, because getting around sanctions, and then also for the Ukrainians being able to get some money as well, and then more, less recently, but pretty recently there was the trucker stuff, and that involved a lot of Bitcoin as well. So I remember back in, I can't remember, was it 2016 or 15 pump? I don't know, it wasn't a pump in 15, was the one which was off the back of, there was a hack to all the computers which had Windows 95 running on them, in the NHS, and there's the WannaCry, was it WannaCry hack? Anyway, there was all this press about, and it just mentioned, in each article, Bitcoin, because keep saying that word Bitcoin, the hackers are using Bitcoin, they're requesting Bitcoin, and even though it was used for a bad thing, I was like, the amount of impressions which Bitcoin's getting right now is going to put the price in a positive direction. And I just think, even though it's for horrible circumstance that people are using Bitcoin, and the sort of circumstance you do want them to be using Bitcoin in the Ukrainian position, obviously, but ideally people wouldn't have to be resorted to Bitcoin. But whatever, there seems to be quite a lot of impressions currently on Bitcoin, and how on Bitcoin being used for real world use cases. So I just think that's going to push the price up is the answer. A very convoluted way.
Let's go ahead and go to the original hodler. This was the original post on Bitcoin Talk. Let's see, where's the date? These horrible web pages. March 4th, 2022. That's today. Anyway, this guy says, I'm hodling December 18th, 2013. Why do I type that title? Because I was wrong the first time, still wrong. Girlfriend's out at a lesbian bar. Bitcoin crashing. Why am I holding? I'll tell you why. Because I'm a bad trader. I know I'm a bad trader. Yeah, you good traders can spot the highs and the lows, pit, pat, piffy, wing, wong, wang, just like that, and make $1 million. Sure, no problem, bro. Likewise, the weak hands are going, oh no, it's going down, I'm gonna sell. And he, and they're like, oh my God, asshole, when the smart traders who know what the fuck they're doing buy back in. But you know what? I'm not part of that group. When the traders buy back in, I'm already part of the market capital. So guess who you're cheating, day traders? Not me. Those taunt treads saying, oh, you should have sold. Yeah, no shit. No shit, I should have sold. I should have sold moments before every sell and bought moments before every buy. But you know what? Not everybody is as cool as you. You only sell in a bear market if you're a good day trader or an illusioned noob. The people in between hold. In a zero-sum game such as this, traders can only take your money if you sell. So I've had some whiskey. Actually, on the bottle, it's spelled whiskey with a sue me, but only payable in BTC. And this is I am hodling. This was the original post for hodl, which is not an acronym. And just like this guy, I'm not a smart man. I don't know anything. But when the times get tough in Bitcoin, I always think back that it's locked in at 21 million units. And I think of it as a collectible, like baseball cards. And I'm like, if I could get my hands on maybe one out of 21 million, that's a bigger share than I have in Apple. That's a bigger share than you could get in Microsoft or IBM or any of these companies. So if you believe in Bitcoin as a product and you can get that collectible share, then maybe it'll go up someday. As the guy says, I am hodling.
And it worked out for him, because when was that? 2014, 13, something like that?
2018.
December 28,
The
13.
decline of the $1,000 peak, I think.
When was it? 2020 what?
13.
2013.
December.
This is 2018, 2013.
Yeah, so that would have been like December 2013, right? That's like about 600, depends on where, about $617, but it was on the decline from 1,000. It peaked at the 3rd of December as the $1,000, 1078, I think, something like that. So yeah, so it dropped like $300 and everyone started to shit their pants. But it always makes me sick when an article makes fun of Bitcoin and they mention the word HODL and they go, which stands for hold on for dear
life.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't. Don't be a twat. How can you possibly report on something that you didn't even do your own freaking research, you idiot? So
That's not just in like crappy little articles as well. That's in like Bitcoin documentaries. They'll say, and it means hold on for dear life. And you're like, no, it doesn't. It's some goofy dude drunk at a keyboard on Bitcoin Talk. Naughty boy.
And I love his anger. He's like, he's mad at everyone. He's mad at the sellers. He's mad at the buyers. He thinks the game's rigged against him. And his only choice out of desperation is this HODL. Dan Eve, higher or lower?
So my predictions last week, because I'm starting to try and track them now. So I said Bitcoin would be up and war would be down. And I was wrong. Bitcoin was up. Only slightly. It was up real loads actually, or like, quite a lot, 10% or something. But now it's only slightly up from last week's prediction. And war down is definitely incorrect because war seems to be going up. So this time, because I keep on getting the war part wrong, I'm going to say Bitcoin up, because if it's up, I'll be happy, and if it's down, I won't be. It's going to be down. It's always down. It's always up. And I'm going to say war nuclear because I'm wrong on the war part. So then hopefully I will be wrong on the war part this time, and war won't be nuclear by next week. And so I'll either see you or won't see you next week.
What a fascinating game. The only way to win is not to play.
Well, you've got to show the result. Can you show the result? Proper goal wants.
I can't because of the way that cameras work. If I show you sideways like this, it doesn't show you anything.
Oh, of course, because it points up.
Yeah, we need a whole separate camera to like really. Even I have a hard time reading it. But here we are. Will the price be higher?
It's justified having a separate camera.
Can you get a mirror? Use a mirror.
You could get a mirror. Let's see. Yes, it says yes.
To the Bitcoin, not to the nuclear stuff.
The price will be higher for Bitcoin next week. Will there be a nuclear war?
Oh no.
All trends towards yes. So this is not really a good question to ask. You're really hoping for a try again later or something here. Here we go. Nuclear war on the ball. My reply is no.
Oh,
there we go. I mean, it's like 70-30 yes. So we really dodged a bullet there. So no nuclear war. We've got one more topic. Moving on to issue 6, maybe. Crypto superpower. India's young investors prefer Bitcoin to gold and boring stocks. While China has banned Bitcoin, next door in India, they're starting to get into it. Many young people have invested in Bitcoin, saying that they find the stock market boring. And they love the thrill and recklessness that comes with investing in volatile currencies. Dan, Eve, what do you think about India as the next big Bitcoin supercenter?
Wow, I think it's a real good candidate, right? Like they said it's not quite banned and it's not quite allowed, and it's being taxed, which means that it's not banned and they're kind of wondering how to deal with it. But taxing doesn't mean necessarily a good thing, because the tax rate that's being given is 30%, which is double the cap gains that's normally given, and 30% is reserved for like gambling. So they do see it as a kind of volatile, bit of a not a kind of secure kind of asset, like a property or something like that. It's more like a spread betting sort of trading sort of thing. But we mentioned, I can't remember if it was last week's show or the week before, about this little fact that's floating around on the internet, that Indian rural homemakers have about 11% of the world's current gold in circulation, and things like dowries and stuff are paid in gold. So imagine if that starts migrating to Bitcoin, right? Like imagine if the new trend is that rather than these traditions being in gold, they're in Bitcoin. And the natural step, right, is, you know, as we said before about Trace Mayer, for example, going from gold to Bitcoin, and Peter Schiff, even though he absolutely like hates Bitcoin, he definitely loves Bitcoin. Let's face it, Schiff loves the Bitcoin. He's like, you know, he's always sending out his little fishing line. He's like, oh, you know, he loves chatting with Bitcoiners. And I bet you know, when Peter Schiff's drunk, right? When Peter Schiff's drunk, he's one of those guys that's like, you know, like the people that shout in people's ears. They're pissed as a fart, and they're shouting in people's ears like about, and he's chatting about Bitcoin instead of gold. And they're like, aren't you a Bitcoin? And he's like, yeah, but sorry, gold bug. And he's like, yeah, there's Bitcoin. Anyway, so I think the natural path is the evolution of gold bugs is to go into Bitcoin. So I think it's a great thing. And I think that India is a big technological powerhouse. And very tech savvy. Was it 700 million on the internet over there? So it seems like a great country to start adopting Bitcoin. And for the remaining 800 million that aren't fully on the internet, and I'm not even sure what the amount is. I should have researched, but the amount of unbanked in India is. But this is a great step to just completely bypassing the banks altogether. Get on the internet, get on Bitcoin, and get stacking sats.
I agree with Dan. The world's largest democracy, India, very tech literate, very unbanked, a perfect match for Bitcoin. I've always thought so, and I'm glad to see them get involved. Ben Ark, your thoughts on India and Bitcoin?
100% perfect match. They're the reason. It's 11% of the world's gold is around the necks of Indian housewives, effectively. They're used to not trusting local currency, and they want a bearer asset which they can hold and cash in if they need to, in bad times. So it's kind of like which is why they have an affinity with gold, and why they like gold, and why they wear gold, and historically as well, why people would keep gold, because they didn't trust their local currencies, and they wanted something which they saw as stable, which they could fall back to. So it makes sense that,
especially in India, they had that incident recently where they declared the $20 bill to be invalid. So a lot of people were saving this 20-pound note, similar to the gold, but the 20-pound note just evaporated and completely lost its value. Bitcoin, much more in line with their gold savings, where you really can hand it down from generation to generation like an heirloom, rather than those cursed $20 notes.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I'm sure that was an extra mark for Bitcoin, and like you were saying, very tech savvy, very good with money and finances. A lot of them, their finances can be quite small, but I mean, a lot of these people know how to use money. This is what's exciting when you have a market with no like onboard requirement to have like a high income. So it gives my only worry is that the whales can kind of like fiddle the price and screw people out of their money. But when in El Salvador, for example, that the street lady selling fruit on her head suddenly gets Bitcoin over Lightning on and she's able to accept Bitcoin just with a phone. And then suddenly she's got access to all these digital asset markets, which she can play around in and invest in on a very small scale. But she's the sort of person on a subsistence wage who's incredibly good with money and will do her due diligence before investing. And so I imagine a lot of these Indian investors are the same. They appreciate bearer asset. They're going to do their due diligence on projects. They're going to talk about the projects. Technically, they're going to understand how a lot of these projects work, because like we've already said, a lot of them are very technically competent. So yeah, absolutely a great candidate for Bitcoin adoption. And in fact, I can imagine that being something which would be embraced by the government, not just the people on a local scale, just because it could also bring in a lot of investment and tourism and whatever else.
It is interesting for how much we all agree that India is a great place for Bitcoin. India didn't agree right away. This was a long time coming. I talked to a lot of people that were working on startups there in India, and I rooted for them, and I thought they were awesome. And then I watched as India shut them down and raided their offices. And I was like, these are legit startup people. They're not doing anything wrong other than running a startup. And then now they're going back the other way, finally seeing this for what it is. So It's sad to see India wait so long, go so slowly, and lose their advantage. It reminds me of an article I read recently about Tesla, and apparently the brother of Elon Musk is spilling the beans and saying they knew nothing about Bitcoin when they started to accept it. And maybe they should have done, back of the cover research. Maybe they should have done any research at all. And the same thing for India. Whatever research they did was probably the wrong kind of research, leading to them to these, Silk Road, these terrorist, criminal sanction decisions, rather than maybe we could have a whole thriving economy here. Maybe we could have young people investing in something other than stocks and holding something other than gold. So, missed opportunity, but it's not completely missed. There's still a chance. So we're heading towards the end of the show. Looking for a prediction. Ben Ark, are you ready with a prediction? Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, I'm not. I've had COVID, so I didn't get to go to. I suppose it's a story of the week, maybe, but I don't know. Advancing Bitcoin is just finished, and it looked like a great conference as always. It's in London, and it's a technical conference, but I mean, I think anyone who would go there would find value in it. Great people, and they've all had a great time. But I couldn't go because I got the vid. So my prediction is that I'll recover from the vid, and then I'll be able to start tackling the mountain of PRs we've got in Bits at the moment. And you start reviewing and reading through some of those and actually getting some of them merged, because I feel bad because they've been sat there for a while I was in Istanbul and while I've had the vid.
You got the vid, but you got to go to Istanbul, even Constantinople. Dan Eve, a prediction.
Well, mine was it sounds worse now when there's no story but it was that war would go nuclear. But there was obviously that's not like a hopeful thing. That's just saying that because I've been wrong about the war part for the last 3 weeks, and therefore if I say war nuclear, then hopefully it doesn't go nuclear.
I mean, if you can't predict the price right, you just want to go out and like predict hundreds of thousands of people being wiped off the earth in a matter of seconds. Like just, go for broke, right?
Oh, yeah, but predicting it's not because I want it. It's because I think it may. I don't think it will happen. The problem is it's the reverse psychology with the universe. That's what I'm doing. So if I say that I'm predicting it, then the universe will be like, that twat's never right. There's definitely not going to be a nuclear war. So that's the logic behind it.
Dan's taking the fall for the rest of us. Ben Ark, do you have a story of the week? I have a prediction. Maybe your story of the week will be about the father of podcasting and a little something that he said about Ben.
Oh, that was nice. Yeah, there was a good thing about Alan Bits with Adam Curry. Yeah, I got a little good little soundbite. That was pretty cool. Where he's talking about how he was interested in Bitcoin, but then he heard about Lightning, so then he installed a Raspberry Blitz. And then he was like, in the podcast, he's like, and then I installed LM Bits. And I was like, look at all the shit you could do with this LM Bits. So it's a really nice little soundbite I'm going to put in the repo. For anyone who doesn't know.
It was programmable money. He got it right away. He's like, so programmable cool. Money.
Yeah, it's a super good quote. And I didn't, so that was a good, in fact, that can be my story because I didn't actually have a story. That's my story of the week. Dan, if you're right next week, we're all just going to be looking at you with disappointment, and inside there'll be part of
we'll have to get one of those bored ape things and convert it into a mutant ape, and then Dan will be the mutant ape.
What was your prediction then, Thomas?
Oh, I don't know if
your prediction was me saying that. Okay, I see. Sorry.
Yeah, I predicted that. I nailed it.
Got the COVID in the brain. Okay, thank you, Thomas. Yeah.
All right, and Eve, do you have a story of the week? Hopefully not nuclear.
No, nothing crazy going on over these parts. But yeah, no, I work undercover, so I can't really talk about my work until I'm able to not be undercover to a certain extent. I mean, there's certain things.
Sounds very mysterious. Shout out to the conference in London. That would have been a great time. I heard there's a conference going off in Vegas soon. That would have been great too, but I just wasn't in the right place with my gear. My gear was here and I was there and back and forth and just couldn't pull that one off this time. Needed a little bit more notice. Just didn't quite have enough notice to pull that one off.
Is that unconfiscatable, is it?
I've
well.
heard, yeah, and also it's like I needed more people. Like I usually have, Dan's there to sit with me
Yeah.
on the couch, and we didn't have my
Posse
team,
one there.
and I didn't have my
Yeah.
gear, and it wasn't the right time to have that great comeback, that return to conferences that we all want.
Miami, Bitcoin Miami. You going to Bitcoin Miami?
Maybe, I don't know.
I'll be
Tough
there.
to
Would.
say. They all think Miami's like right next to California, but it's very far.
Yeah, but
It's
like,
not- they're like, all Americans
Well,
go to Miami. I mean, you live in Washington, come on, like you live in Las Vegas, you live all over. Just come to Miami. It's only just as long as my flight, but we'll see how it goes. Thanks to everybody in the audience for giving us those 50 or so thumbs up. You're in a unique group of 50 people who watch this show, and there's about 500 other people who consider watching it but don't push that thumbs up. You also push subscribe. Go subscribe to WCN Clips. Give that guy some support. He's over there making those clips each week. You could even share them with your friends. And hopefully we don't have a nuclear war and we're all here next week. But we'll see how it goes. Keep watching the news and see what happens. Until next time, bye.